Welcome to the Moulding Health Show. Our goal is to leverage the wisdom and experience of healthcare practitioners to set you on a path of self-discovery and healing. These insights, coupled with a multidisciplinary approach to each area of interest, should provide an invaluable resource to everyone looking for a better approach to health. In this episode, we speak to Casey Forman about burnout and cognitive behavioral therapy from a counseling psychologist perspective. Casey Forman, welcome to the show. So we're really glad to have you on board, and we're going to be talking about a really cool topic. Well, cool, maybe not in all senses of the word, but definitely applicable in the last two years, which is burnout. Welcome on board.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
Yeah. So Shaz, again, got an amazing, guest on board, and I was surprised that we haven't spoken about this topic so far. And obviously, it's still in its infancy with the the Moulding Health Show. But burnout, we spoke about it, with a few practitioners. But burnout is such I would say it's quite a prevalent thing, especially with the COVID-19 pandemic. So can you just take us through that? I mean, obviously, from your perspective, how do people struggle with burnout? And what's interesting about this, and this is more from my personal experience as well, is that you probably don't realize you have burnout and you have some of the symptoms. Is that true?
That's so true. Yeah, that is exactly actually why I wanted to raise this issue today, because I think many of us are probably facing burnout right now, and we just don't. We either do realize that we're exhausted and fatigued and burnt out, but we don't really want to accept it because it's just not. It's actually in our society, it's safe to say, especially in South Africa, we just need to get on with it. With the load shedding, with COVID, with whatever's going on, there's no time to think about how you're really feeling. And that's what I actually wanted to draw attention to today, by actually talking a bit about burnout and also the effect it has on the brain. On actually, because I think we're very interested as human beings in facts and evidence and what is actually going on in our brain, in order for us to actually take action and do something about it. If we just say, we're just exhausted, fatigued, people don't tend to take that seriously until they land up in hospital or they really just fall down and collapse. So I hope that I'll shed some light on the effects that burnout has on the brain, also what it is, what it looks like, how, perhaps how it's different to depression, for example, and then also just how to manage it if you are experiencing some of the symptoms that I might raise today.
Okay. I mean, I think you touched on a few things there, and I really like the brain part, because I almost get the feeling, when people are stressed out, they're there, but they're not quite there. And I see it. I mean, we've got two kids, like if they're quite anxious about something, they're there, but they're almost like they're not listening. It's like, they almost like shut off a bit. And so I would like, so I mean, so let's start from the beginning. I mean, so what maybe causes burnout? And we start from there. And then I really like, and I hope we go down that route, what you mentioned about depression and burnout, because I think those might be confused, as you already said. So let's start with, how would someone get burnt out?
Okay, great. So, let's just start with the key components of burnout. So, burnout was actually coined the first time ever in the 70s by an American psychologist called Herbert Freudenberger. So he actually used it back in the day to describe the consequences of severe stress and high ideals in helping professions specifically. But we know today that this is not, you don't need to be a psychologist or a doctor or a social worker to experience burnout. It's definitely not used these days just for the helping professions or for the dark side of self-sacrifice in various professional roles. It can truly affect anyone, from stressed out career-driven people and celebrities to kids, even to overworked employees to homemakers. So factors that lead to burnout can relate to experiencing ongoing demands, unrealistic expectations. So it can be of yourself and of others. And that is the formula for burnout, no matter what context it's in. It doesn't matter who you are, what stage, how many years you've been practicing, anyone can experience burnout. So the key components of burnout. So how do what does this consist of? So according to Freudenberger, this includes feeling a sense of depersonalization, as you said, Oliver. Just almost a sense of detachment from reality. The second component is a decreased sense of accomplishment. And the third component is emotional exhaustion. So just that sense of I'm finished. I have no energy. I have nothing more to give. Burning the candle at both ends. So while everyone experiences these factors in burnout, over the years, it has been discovered that for men specifically, which I thought was quite interesting according to research, burnout seems to manifest as depersonalization in particular. And for women, burnout seems to manifest as emotional exhaustion. So, I mean, that kind of also, but I suppose, coincides with stereotypes of women and men. But according to research, this is also evident that men become quite detached, quite depersonalized, and women, they just emotionally exhausted. Perhaps they lash out. So I think it also differs. Anyone can experience burnout, but the way you experience it often differs based on your personality. So I mean, of course, we all have different ways of dealing with stress, and I guess that this definitely plays a role in, are you going to experience burnout or not? So perhaps I could just start off then by talking about understanding the roots of burnout in the workplace, because I mean that is, although you can experience burnout anyway, the workplace seems to be, especially now in our day and age, a very, very stressful place. So it's not just about working far too hard. According to a study published in Frontiers in Psychology, in fact, it's actually about a mismatch between expectations as well. So what you unconsciously need from your workplace, and then also the opportunities and rewards that you're actually given. So if you happen to need work that's personally fulfilling or gives you perhaps a lot of time on your own, but your work doesn't do any of that, you're in an open plan office with screaming bosses and people around you constantly, and you're constantly switched on, you're much more likely to experience burnout, according to research. So the important question from all of this is, what do you really need for your job, and what isn't it giving you? So those are just maybe questions that don't always have direct answers, but I think it's important to start considering what we're actually feeling when we're at work, and how that intense pressure and stress has what impact that has on the brain. So I don't know if you'd like me to just talk about the amygdala and how the different structures in the brain are actually impacted with ongoing stress, which is what leads to burnout.
Cassie, just touching on what you were saying there about, if you're needing certain things in the workplace, and so, your own office space or that kind of thing, and you're in an open plan office. So are you finding more that companies are starting to take these type of things into consideration to try and prevent burnout within staff? Or is it just a case of, as the employee, if this isn't the right setting for you, maybe you should be moving somewhere else? Because from my way of thinking is, in order for the economy to be sustainable, as companies, we need to be looking at making sure that our employees are not obviously burning out, but also at the same time, kind of looking at, is this the right fit for the company?
Yeah, that's a very important issue that you mentioned, Nisha. And I think in the workplace, although I've done a lot of company talks lately, and I've tried to advocate for mindfulness and checking in with your colleagues before you start your Zoom session, before you start talking about whatever's on the agenda for today. And while I think in corporates especially, while they acknowledge the importance of this, they actually I don't find that there has been a very big shift, especially in South Africa. And that's from my first-hand experience. I know that research shows otherwise, that people are taking that into account. But from what I've seen with corporates that I've dealt with, I think that really that it does boil down to just getting on with it, just getting it done, and that's why we live in a situation we find ourselves in a situation where we are depressed and burnt out, and as South Africans we're dealing with all sorts of stresses on a daily basis, and we just sometimes don't have the tools, or feel like we can't express our needs. So yeah, as much as I'd like to say it's being dealt with, I think that we have a long way to go, and perhaps I can share some ways of incorporating that into our daily lives, and I would highly recommend that corporates also they come on board and realize the importance of this.
I love that you said that, and I think that's the level of honesty that I think is is sorely needed, because exactly what you said is pretty much how I experienced it. I mean, I've been in corporate for over 22 years, and I was fortunate towards the latter half of my corporate career, I was able to almost take a break from it, because it gets pretty toxic, because the expectations, and I can see why psychology is a science as well, because economists believe the same thing. There's a mismatch between expectations. That's how the stock market works. It's like, it's not that the share price of the company has actually gone down, it's just like what you expected it to be, and there's that mismatch of expectations. And my experience of it is that companies like to say this because it's a new buzzword, like maybe it's a recruitment strategy or something like that. But when it comes to it, and the deadline is the deadline, they don't really care. It's like, just get it done. I don't care whether you have to cancel birthday parties and I had to be sometimes, that person that has to go and tell, the team, actually, guys, it's not our fault, but we're the ones that can fix it. So guess what we're doing this weekend? We're fixing the problem. And it used to be the most frustrating thing ever. And I don't know how it played in our minds, but I definitely knew the outcomes of it, as in, retention was off the charts because people are resigning. And it's like, that's how it works. You go, as Shaz said just now, you go find another environment, and you think it's going to be better because they promised you that in the interview, but then it's actually not, because as the deadlines come up. But that's just more my experience. But I love what you're saying, and I just had to say that, from my experience, it correlates with what you're saying. And I found very few companies where that, well, I haven't found any companies. I think we tried to create that company, but even then, the other thing I would say, and I don't know if you find this, and maybe you can correlate on this stories, most people don't even know what they want. We adults, and we're supposed to be, we know what we're doing, but most of the time, you ask someone, so what's going to be the perfect environment for you? And they tell you stuff that they think, other people want to hear. So they say, yes, open plan is amazing. And 6 months later, it's actually, I actually think I would have preferred my own office, so I don't have to deal with the noise and, Shaz screaming at me in the background. But
exactly. Oh my word, yes. And that's, I think that's the crux of the matter, is we're not aware of what we need as human beings. And to become aware, and that is actually what CBT is all about. So I'll touch on that a bit later, but cognitive behavioral therapy is becoming aware of our thoughts and becoming more aware of our feelings, not so that we can get rid of them, but so that we can just acknowledge that we are feeling uncomfortable, and actually just embrace that and lean in with, a sense of acceptance and kindness and compassion, rather than, oh my word, I'm feeling anxious, I need to get rid of this sense of anxiety, and that just escalates into a panic attack, which I've seen by many successful people, students, scholars, and they don't understand, why, and it's because of their self-talk, it's because of the thoughts that are circulating, the negative thoughts in their minds, and they don't know, they're not aware of it. They're not really, as much as they're panicking, they don't really have the resources or tools to calm themselves down, to be mindful. What is mindfulness? It's a word that's thrown around so often. So let's just jump right into firstly the brain, so that I can I can give some evidence that everyone seems to always be looking for. So the amygdala is a cluster of almond-shaped cells located near the base of the brain, and this is the emotional center of the brain. And this defines and regulates emotions and forms part of the brain's limbic system. So one of my very favorite psychologists, his name is Daniel Goleman. He's written a lot on emotional intelligence, and he termed the amygdala hijack. He coined this term. The amygdala hijack occurs when your amygdala responds to stress and disables your frontal lobes. So your frontal lobes are part of your brain's cerebral cortex, and this area of the brain controls voluntary actions like reasoning, thinking, movements, decision-making, all the things we actually are forced to do in our everyday lives, and planning whether we want to or not. So it's more rational than the amygdala. The amygdala is the emotional hotspot. So the amygdala hijack activates the fight or flight response and disables rational and reasoned responses. So in other words, the amygdala hijacks control of your brain and your responses when you're going through stressful situations over and over and over again. And this response, obviously, it helps people in immediate danger to react quickly for their safety and security. So, for example, the fight or flight response helps early humans respond to threats or to avoid being injured or killed. So you can imagine trying to escape from a vicious lion in the Kruger National Park, and the amygdala activates this fight or flight response without any initiative from you. It's just automatic. So when that part of your brain senses danger, it signals your brain to pump stress hormones, preparing your body to either fight for survival or flee to safety. So for early humans, the fight or flight response was vital. It was completely vital. The threat of physical harm was very, very real and tangible. But today, however, we have a very real threat as well, just in a different form. So you're more likely to experience psychological threats today, such as the pressures and stress of modern life, parenting, relationships. These emotions can trigger the amygdala's fight or flight response. And this is why it's important for us to differentiate between stresses and stress, because it's actually quite amazing that we have the skills and knowledge now, and we've done so much research on the brain that we know that you can actually. So stresses are obviously the things that create the stress, that cause the stress in our everyday life, like I mentioned, financial pressure, your husband perhaps, and then stress is the physiological reaction. What happens to our body when we perceive this threat, which can be likened to trying to escape from a lion chasing you in the Kruger Park. So this stress response is sort of like what happens to our body. It's intended to help us flee, and your whole body just uses up all this adrenaline, this cortisol. Your digestive system is activated. Everything is activated. Your immune system, in order to achieve this one goal. So whatever it is. But let's just imagine this lion, because when we relate it to ourselves and our emotions, we don't take this as seriously. So once you survive this, you can imagine, you tell the story, you jump for joy, you feel like you've completed the stress response cycle, and that's what it is. So there's a beginning, a middle, and an end of a stress response cycle. Also, it can be referred to as what Daniel Goleman said, referred to as the amygdala hijack, hijacking the amygdala. So there's just different terms that have been created over the years. But the point is that, number one, there's a beginning, there's a perceived threat. So, and then number two, you're doing something with your body. So you're activating the body, and that is very important. You're dealing with the stress reaction. It's affecting your physiological reactions. And then to complete the stress response cycle, number three, is where your body perceives a signal that it has escaped the potential threat. So what our problem is in our society today is that we go through one and two, the perceived threats, doing something with our body, and then we don't really, if you think of yourself sitting in traffic for 2 hours, from Sandton to Vereeniging, whatever, and your body goes into a complete state of distress, and you get home and you've dealt with the stress now, but you haven't dealt with the stress. What do? You probably just internalize all that frustration that is built up over that ride, and you're not dealing with it. So that's good news for us, because you can actually deal with the stress. You can deal with the stress while you're experiencing a stressor. And that's what I wanted to kind of highlight today, that while you're in the traffic, while you're before you get home and when you get home, practice that mindful breathing. And what does that mean? That means you might not be a person who enjoys meditating or enjoys the idea of mindfulness. It might be quite airy-fairy for you, but just to actually give yourself the space to, I say this to children and to adults all the time, to picture a square, like an actual square, and breathe in and out, and imagine the vertical and horizontal dimensions of the square, and picture yourself breathing in for 3 counts and out for 6 counts. That's something you can actually do to complete the stress response cycle. Also, you can jump for joy when you get home. When you get home, normally all you want to do is just collapse. You just want to collapse, or you want to, you don't necessarily feel as alive as you would when you escape from the lion. And these are daily stresses. We deal with chronic stress on a daily basis. And then on top of that, there's load shedding. So that just exacerbates our anxiety, our frustration. And often we don't give ourselves the opportunity to complete the stress response, because we don't think it's important. We think, okay, we've dealt with the stressor, therefore the stress is over. But that's not true. And I think that's actually fantastic news for us, because we don't need to wait for the stressor to disappear before we can deal with the stress. And most of our stresses in today's age are chronic stresses. They are here day after day. We deal with them, and we don't really know how to complete the stress response cycle. So, for example, you get home, you tense your body. You do jumping jacks in the car park. You vent or scream, vent to a friend or a colleague, if you have a colleague that you like, which in my case, I'm very grateful to have many colleagues that I love. So it's very important that you give yourself the time to complete the stress response cycle, because if you don't, that means that you basically, your amygdala will continue to be activated, and your frontal lobe will continue to shut down, meaning you won't be able to reason properly, or to think properly, or to make decisions that you need to make on a day-to-day basis, to make rational decisions anyway. So I want you to also, when you feel threatened or significantly stressed, to acknowledge how your body feels and what it is doing. This is your body's fight or flight response. Take stock of your emotions and physical symptoms, if any. In the beginning, this evaluation may have to occur after an episode, like, if you do happen to panic, or if you do happen to not maybe deal with the stress by completing the stress response. Stopping or hijacking the moment may be difficult, for example. So when you feel this response again, which I think we all feel many times a day, acknowledge it and work to regain control. So remind yourself that this is an automatic response, but not the most logical one. When you have calmed down or you feel less stressed, you can activate your frontal cortex again. Begin by thinking about what activated the response and how you felt. Consider responses you could have. These will be more thoughtful and rational responses. So if you feel emotional in the moment, just give yourself some more time. Take some time out when you get home before engaging with your partner and lashing out at them. During the height of a fight or flight response, breathing is a powerful tool. And so many people think, well, how is that? Many of my clients say, I don't want any breathing exercises or breathing techniques. Please don't give those to me. They're a waste of time. They don't work for me. But there's research to show that breathing is linked to our well-being and to our brain. So if we're not able to regulate our breathing, we're not able to slow down our amygdala and just regain control of our nervous system. So if you can think about the speed of your breath and work to slow it down, Find a natural and calm rhythm and actually focus on that, consciously focus on that. Focus on how your body feels as you inhale and exhale, for example. And you know, I think what's very important is through mindfulness, you really can take stock of things like how you're feeling and what's stimulating you, what's triggering you. You can learn to actually, when a thought pops into your head, to say, well, thoughts, you know, where did this thought come from? To actually say to yourself, why am I feeling just a state of distress, or you know, why am I feeling the need to relax? Because that's what everyone says. Just relax. You know, when you're feeling stressed out or burnt out, take time for yourself. Self-care is the way. Self-care is not actually the way. I think in many respects, we need as a community, we need to take care of each other. We can't do it on our own. You know, we can't actually do all of this on our own and feel responsible for ourselves day in and day out, as if we're these robotic things, and we're not affected by what's going on around us. So, I mean, mindfulness. Having said that, mindfulness does take practice. It's very easy to wander with your thoughts. When you first try to focus on your body and your feelings and your thoughts and where do they come from, to question these things. But as with so many things, practice makes it much easier. And it's important, obviously, to do this regularly, not when you're just in a highly aroused state. So the point is to try and prevent this amygdala hijack and to prevent this stress response from occurring. And also, I think it's also quite nice, and this is a big one in our society, is to challenge perfectionism with cognitive behavioral therapy. So perfectionism is a massive cause of burnout. According to a study done very recently, 2018, people who are driven to achieve the best at all times won't rest until they've given 100%. They can break their bodies down as a result, and they normally do. They continue to persevere until they literally fall down. So if you suspect your perfectionism is driving you to feel cynical, exhausted, and then bad at your job as well, there's a technique that can help, and that is CBT. So reaching out to a therapist. But if you can't do that, there's so many resources available on Spotify. You can download podcasts on cognitive behavioral therapy. So CBT, as it's called, uses techniques in talking therapy to shift your thoughts and your behavior gradually, and is particularly good for tackling embedded thought patterns like perfectionism, for example. So I really do think that by questioning our thoughts, practicing mindfulness, and also challenging organizations to do better, I think that will all go a long way to reducing the alarmingly high level of burnout that South Africans are facing, that I see each and every day in my practice.
That was amazing. And, Chaz and I are just like busy nodding because that, some of those things, makes so much sense. But I have to ask, so the people at the Kruger National Park that get out of their cars intentionally, which part of the brain is that?
I think for them, their frontal lobe their frontal lobes have shut down, all executive functioning is on pause for whatever reason. And the amygdala is in flight, clearly. I wonder if they might have some slight brain damage.
Yeah, we were joking because we were like, Shaz was like, she was telling us all these stories, people like getting out of their cars. And I'm like, why would you do that? Oh, someone, hey, Shaz, you can collaborate. But there was someone that got stuck. And they obviously had to get people to come out and rescue them. But yeah, that's a bit crazy. But on a more serious question is, how do you, and maybe this sounds really silly as well, but how do you know you're stressed out?
So that's an interesting question, and I think some people are a lot more aware of their internal state of being than others. Just in practice, I see some people they'll come and say, "There's nothing wrong with me. I'm just here because I don't know. I'm just struggling to concentrate. There's nothing wrong. I've lost motivation. But I'm not a person who stresses or that's I have things under control." And that you can see that level of emotional dysregulation, but also like an unwillingness to accept what's actually going on, and that they, just to acknowledge that they're stressed. So I think, for that person like that, it'll be a lot more difficult to kind of address their concerns. But the fact that they've sought therapy is quite remarkable. Most people that do seek out therapy, there are people that are quite in tune with the emotional state, or maybe too in tune sometimes. And they, I think they'll, practical signs of burnout and feeling really stressed is, you're exhausted all the time. You don't have the motivation to get out of bed in the morning. I mean, of course, that could also coincide with depression, which can be more serious. But often there's, those are comorbidities, and you can diagnose both really interchangeably if it's reached that point. But struggling to get out of bed in the morning, struggling to get through the day, feeling like it's really hard to concentrate, and not really feeling fulfilled. I think those are the main signs. When things that you used to enjoy before just become really, really just an effort to get out of bed, an effort to get through the day. I think that's when you need to seek help in whatever form, whatever form works for you. But I think seeking help from a therapist can help, because they're able to just create that perspective and let you reflect on your thoughts. And I don't think we give ourselves the opportunity to do that with our friends, with our families, often enough.
I know Shaz has a question, but I want to say, so the people that seek out therapy as well, sometimes it's their husband or their wife telling them, you either go for therapy or there's problems. So it might not quite be, self-awareness, but sometimes people do need that push as well, because you don't really see it. And, where I saw this as well, so my wife's a clinical psychologist, and we went to some specialist, I think it was an attorney or something. And, we got out of the meeting, and she obviously knew the person because he was going through a stressful time. I think it was birth of their first child or something. And she said, "Did you see he was having a panic attack?" And I was oblivious. I didn't see nothing. For me, it was like normal. But there was a time, obviously she spotted it, but, and it's, it goes back with the point you made earlier about panic attacks. And you kind of see that, for me, when I think panic attack, I see like, almost like epileptic, but it's obviously not that way, because it's almost like it's a temporary, like just shut down. And so I think, for anyone listening to it, panic attack might not be what I'm thinking as well in my head, complete shutdown. It might just be that like just a momentary kind of thing. Do you agree with that? And then Shaz can maybe ask her a question.
Yes, I do agree with that. Everyone experiences stress differently, and stress responses differently. So it might not be, you might not see it, but the person can definitely be feeling it and internalizing panic for months and months until they actually land up in hospital and have no idea why. For the people that are completely unaware of what's going on within themselves. And that's why it is important to just raise that level of awareness, and also to just to lean in with compassion and kindness, and know that it's okay. It's okay if you're feeling overwhelmed and stressed and panicked. I think right now, it's almost, I just wanted to normalize that for everyone, because we're all feeling that way. And if we're not, then I don't know, there might be something wrong with us. If we're, if we're feeling ecstatic and completely in control of our environment and what's going on in the country, I think then would be cause for concern.
Casey, you've mentioned a couple of really, really interesting things. So, just looking back and through my life and that kind of stuff. So coming from being a bartender, it was always funny because you could spot the guy who was walking in because he'd had a bad day. And the excuse was always, I just want to wash away the day before I get home. And the more I start thinking about it now, that was in their own way, just taking cognizance of, I've had whatever stresses throughout the day, I need to recenter before moving on. On the same hand, though, then everybody turns around and says, yeah, but the guy's a raging alcoholic because he's in the pub every afternoon.
Yeah.
I think it is very important that we start speaking about mindfulness and that we get over this concept of, Africa isn't for sissies. You've got to be big, you've got to be strong, you've got to be brave, because, you can be as physically strong as you want, but when you start taking on all those little stresses, they build. I mean, we spoke to a birth specialist who was saying, the amount of people that don't realize that men suffer from prenatal or antenatal depression because their whole life has also just changed. But of course, you've got to be the big, proud daddy. So I think more and more we need to start looking at how do we, like you said, almost that self-actuate, that take stock, calm down, breathe a bit, and then move forward. I mean, I watch friends of mine, they'll have Netflix on and at the same time are scrolling through TikTok or Facebook or Instagram or whichever social media is in front of them. If you actually ask them, they're completely zoned out. So they're not even cognitively taking in what they're actually watching, but they're relaxing on the couch. And that, I think, would that almost be a sign of, okay, maybe you are having a bit of burnout?
It could be, especially that avoidance, that chronic avoidance, which a lot of people that I see, they just actually, they're sometimes paralyzed. They're paralyzed by stress and anxiety and sometimes depression, but sometimes, they just avoidance because they're completely they're in denial of basically of what they're experiencing, and they haven't sought help. So just by avoidance, by drinking too much or not being present in the moment, it's very easy. And I mean, I say this as if it's easy to be mindful, but it's a difficult task. It's difficult to be, and you can be mindful in anything you do. So you can be mindful as you're sitting in traffic and a taxi has cut you off. You can be mindful by just acknowledging how frustrated and annoyed you are, and perhaps doing something like putting on a nice podcast that you really love listening to, or practicing your breathing and almost just giving yourself the space to say, this is very annoying. I'm very annoyed right now. But I'm not going to let this completely ruin my day, and I'm not going to allow myself to lash out at everyone else when I get home. I'm going to take some time out when I get home. I'm going to go for that run. You can be mindful while you're sitting in the car, while you're running. You don't need to meditate and sit still for 2 hours, and because meditation is not for everyone. And I think that's okay. It's okay that you haven't found exactly what works for you, but just to try and slow it down and practice that breathing, practice gratitude as well, and compassion. I think that will go a long way.
I think you said it's interesting that you said the running stuff, and I think we didn't talk as much maybe about the abuse part that Chaz was talking about, maybe because there's other ways of dealing with all of the stresses and stuff like that. But I remember at the beginning of this year, I mean, it was quite a stressful time. We were struggling with one of the products, and having 2 kids, and you're stuck in this in the normal day. That the only time I found, and I'm not a morning person, I've learned to become a morning person after having kids, but I had to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and just journal and do even 10 minutes of meditation, and for some that cleared it out for me. But I know I worked with people, and they said, if I don't go for my run every day, or if I don't get on that bicycle, I'm going to go insane. And those were their words. I've never felt that. I've never felt I have to go and spend half an hour running. But is there something about that, in terms of exercise? Is it a guaranteed way to get the stress part out of your life?
I think it's not always a guaranteed way. It sure helps, but if you're not mindful, if you're not actually practicing being in the moment while you're running, or while you're taking time out. If you're doing something else, if you're on your phone, for example, or if you're thinking about how you haven't achieved your goal for the day and you're not going to get your discovery vitality points, or whatever the case may be, that can be quite detrimental to your health then, because you're constantly competing and it's not good enough. And it depends on your frame of mind, I suppose. And if you're actually consciously trying to be mindful, as hard as it may be, I mean, thoughts come and go. It's normal for your mind to wander, and for distressing thoughts to enter your mind while you're running, about work or about a fight you had with your partner. But then to just bring your attention back, to gently remind yourself that you're doing this for yourself, you're doing this to decrease those levels of stress. And I mean, obviously it does help in terms of, releasing endorphins and, the happy hormones and that sort of thing. But you need to find something that works for you. So for some people, playing tennis or playing golf, they can be quite competitive sports, and then you constantly criticizing yourself. I find with a lot of clients, I didn't play well enough, and it's such a frustrating game. And perhaps then it's not what you need when you're in a state of burnout. What you need is to find something that's soothing, whether it's listening to a peaceful song, or whether it's watching a program that makes you laugh. Trying to just get back to basics rather than, I need to run, I need to achieve this goal today and run 10 kilometers. Even just getting out for 15 minutes will do you the world of good if you're able to remain mindful and present in the moment.
I like that. And it kind of, it reinforces what I thought, which is, I don't think that's like the magic, because I never got into it. I mean, I never got into the running thing, but, I know lots of people, because I know lots of people that do that. And, and I do have a theory that discovery vitality thing probably creates more stress than it's probably worth. That's why we didn't get the latest Apple Watch, because just to do like 10,000 steps a day is more anxiety than it's probably worth. I think it was like $200 or $300 a month or something, that they would give you.
Yeah,
But
no, definitely, and constantly being switched on. That's the worst thing, to have your notifications on your phone, on your watch. I mean, you really, when you go for a run, just switch that off so you don't receive emails while you're trying to stay mindful. I think if we constantly switched on, and that's just really just just preventing us from calming down and from kind of just zoning out even for 10 minutes.
And the psychological aspects of knowing that you're cheating if you're putting the watch on your dog or the kids to get them to run. It's like, or I've seen people in the car, busy with trying to do this with their, and like that's not the point.
But
oh, really? Okay, sorry I mentioned that. But that's quite funny, because it's kind of defeating the purpose of
definitely it really is.
I love this conversation. It was amazing, and I think there's so many actionable things here. And I mean, I definitely see almost a resource. You mentioned some podcasts. We would love to get that, and maybe if you just let us know, we'll put it in the show notes, because I think that'll be great. And then I think there's something about making it more actionable for people, what you could do. And I think, maybe there's an app around that, but maybe give it some thought. Maybe we can put something together in terms of resources. I think it would be amazing around that. I think the point we didn't bring out maybe as much, but I'll probably want to close off with that, because obviously we're running out of time, and we do want to be mindful of that with you. But how would this psychology aspects, because we touched on it a little bit, maybe talking through it, maybe the CBT side, when would someone that's struggling with burnout, so now they know what burnout is, they know, okay, these are the type of things that they could go through, but they're still feeling that, there's a panic attack coming out. When would I seek out therapy with Cassie?
Okay. So I think if you're experiencing any of the depersonalization, loss of enjoyment in your everyday life, and feeling completely exhausted, seek out help. That's time to then seek out help from a professional, from a psychologist like myself. And I run support groups as well, for people who are a burnout support group actually, and for anxiety, stress, burnout, but maybe you feel like you want that personal space and personal attention, in individual therapy. So I'd say definitely when you're experiencing that kind of frame of mind, but also obviously if it's in anything worse or more extreme than that, because obviously there could be many other factors. There could be major depressive disorder that perhaps would be diagnosed. There could be grief. There could be there could be PTSD if it's actually a traumatic situation that you've experienced. So there's many other variables, and diagnoses, but that could be considered. But if you are experiencing extreme fatigue, exhaustion, lack of enjoyment, depersonalization, please seek help.
I like that, and I'm glad we covered that aspect, because I think that's. But I think what you did really well in this session is you covered different aspects that people could do, and even the support groups. I don't think we've ever mentioned that so far in the show, and I think especially in a clinical setting, hospitals do this a lot. We've got clients that are in day clinics, and they run support groups for multiple things, and I don't think anyone's ever mentioned that. Hey, Shaz. And maybe on your side, Shaz, anything that we should have asked Cassie that we didn't?
I think we covered quite a lot of information on burnout, and we touched on the CBT. I do also like the concept of support groups, and if you really think about it and you take it to the next step, that's where things like NA and AA started, was because you can't always do stuff on your own. So being able to actually talk to somebody going, this is the stress that I'm going through, and actually be able to work on that is definitely, for me, I think, a benefit. Just on the idea of CBT, because I know a lot of people, when they hear, cognitive behavioral therapy, they all think that it's, we're going to alter your behavior. How does CBT, in broad strokes, how does it actually work?
So I think you would start off by looking at the individual's core beliefs, and it works in group therapy too. It works really well. So what are their current beliefs about themselves and about the world? You want to know what's going on, and then maybe there's you'll start highlighting for your clients, or maybe they'll start realizing for themselves some of the maybe distorted cognitions or distorted beliefs or perceptions they have of themselves. And oftentimes there are these negative automatic thoughts or hot thoughts, that are triggered throughout the day, like I'm not good enough, I'm a failure, I can't get through this, oh my word, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm going to get fired, people are going to realize I'm a fraud, or I don't know. So it's just these very unrealistic, very irrational thoughts that we all experience on a day-to-day basis when we're feeling stressed, or especially when we burnt out. We start doubting our abilities. So I think that's what we want to trigger as psychologists. We want to not trigger, sorry, address. We want to address these triggers. We want to address the triggers, and we want to help our clients find healthier ways of thinking about themselves. Healthier ways of it. Also, it's evidence-based CBT, which appeals to many clients. And so to look at, is there evidence to suggest that I am a failure? Is there evidence to suggest that I'm going to get fired? Perhaps there is. Perhaps there is evidence, and then to make them aware of that. Okay, but why is that? What have you done in order to kind of reach these consequences, and perhaps, to acknowledge that, to acknowledge if you made a mistake, or to acknowledge just where you're at, to be honest with yourself. And then to find, obviously, through behavioral and cognitive intervention, to to try and restructure or reframe these negative automatic thoughts through engaging in opposite behaviors of what you're actually feeling. So, oftentimes it's just if you're feeling down and fatigued, and the last thing you feel like doing is going for a walk, actually forcing yourself to do that. So behavioral interventions are just that. It's a lot simpler than it sounds. Cognitive behavioral therapy. Yes, there's a lot of aspects and a lot of techniques, but trying to just activate different behaviors or perhaps different thoughts, because they're all interlinked, and that'll kind of lead to different feelings about yourself. So looking at that cognitive model of your feelings, thoughts, and behaviors, and trying to target just one aspect, because they're all interlinked and they all influence each other. And that often is what we're looking at in CBT. It's not an unattainable therapy, and that's why CBT podcasts exist, so that you can become your own therapist and question your own thoughts. And I think the cure for burnout is not self-care, really. It is all of us caring for each other. So through support groups, through just dialogue, through normalizing burnout and anxiety and depression, and speaking about it instead of just ignoring it.
I like it because of what you said. I mean, it's evidence-based. I think a few other clients have told us the same thing. It's evidence-based, but it's also like tangible. And it's, so I think it appeals to lots of people, especially in the world that we live in, where people want to see results and be in some level of control. And I think it's also, it could be short-term from what I understand. Is that true? It doesn't have to be, like with the psychodynamic approach, sometimes it probably takes a bit longer, to probably see the realizations or the benefits. But from what I gather, CBT might be, more short-term as well.
Yes, no, it definitely is. It's definitely. I think it's in our society where you can't afford to go for more than 6 to 8 sessions, or perhaps 10 sessions, 10 therapy sessions. We need to find a quicker approach or a quicker treatment plan, because people are in need and they are seeking help, and you want to help them as best you can. So each session should be as if it's their last. So don't just let it continue, and you feel as if you're not really making any progress. And if you do feel that way and you are in therapy at the moment, then just know that therapy is subjective. You might not have found the right therapist, and that's okay. Rather shop around and find someone who you feel comfortable with and you feel that you're actually making progress, than just sticking it out because, oh no, if I can't do this, then I'm a failure. Because I think that's the kind of dialogue I'm getting as well. I'm like, well, I've been to these other therapists and I haven't felt that it helped me at all. So how is it going to be different with you? And then that's where I come in, obviously try and make a positive change in their lives.
I like that. Someone told me like Freud advocated for being in therapy every day. And obviously that's going to be out of the realm of possibility in terms of financials for most people anyway. And I think the amount of time, because therapy, it's not just like you go for therapy and then it's sorted. There's lots of after thinking, I think, after that, and actually doing the stuff. So I don't think that might be reasonable. So I like the CBT approach, and I think there's definitely benefits, for that, especially in the society that we're living in. So thanks very much for the work that you're doing. On your side, Cassie, anything that we should have asked you? This was amazing. I think we covered some really cool thoughts, especially around the brain. And I think you kept it very actionable, which I think would be amazing, to anyone listening to this. But anything that we should have asked you that we didn't?
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me. I know I had a lot of fun today. Thanks. I don't have any questions. I just wanted to perhaps just say that I work in Fourways, a child's play therapy centre, and I also work in Bedford View at Clifford Medical Centre. So I see children and adults, and I run support groups. So please feel free to contact me or reach out. If anyone's listening and feels that they would like to reach out for help.
Okay, that's brilliant. I'm glad you mentioned that. We do include your details in the show notes anyway. So, if anyone wants to do that, they'll contact you directly. But I think the key part of this is that if anyone has an inkling, that they want to learn more about burnout, or they're in that process, what they would have got out of this is how do you work, and you as a person as well. They would have heard your voice. They would have,
Yeah.
heard it, like, yeah, that kind of makes sense, or it doesn't, and hopefully reach out to you directly, and then you take it from there. I think that's the biggest thing we want to get out of this is the awareness part. Because Google is not your friend, because sometimes you don't know what to ask, and it just gives you all of these like weird articles anyway. And I think especially in the South African context, it's cool that they can actually hear someone from South Africa, like you said, And I think in the world, I mean, that's the one good thing that COVID's done for us, is that it's opened up healthcare practitioners to the possibility of online work, which is really cool. I think 2 years ago, when we tried to convince clients to do demo sessions of our software on Zoom, everyone was like, no, you have to come to our offices, or we have to come to your offices. And now, it's like just part of normal days, where we could do Zoom sessions, which is great, because I think it opens up the connection to, amazing people like yourself that can help a lot more people. I think that's the one thing we always said was, the online space just opens up the possibility that you can help someone in Cape Town. If someone reached out to you and, you were open to that type of engagement, I'm sure that would be possible. That
Exactly.
seems to be the case.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. No, I find that I'm doing so much online work at the moment, even with clients overseas, that have recently immigrated. It just really broadens your perspective of what therapy can be and how useful it can be in different environments, different contexts.
And the other benefit to it is what you mentioned, like, the people, I don't understand this, but the people that travel from the far outskirts of like Pretoria to like Johannesburg or Sandton and spend 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the afternoon. But people like that, now therapy is going to be out of the way if they want to come see you in Bedfordview or even Four Ways, because it's just not possible to do with everything else. But to be able to get on a Zoom session, even if it was 5 o'clock in the afternoon, if you were like doing sessions at that time, that's possible to do, which is amazing.
It is
for people.
amazing. Yeah. No, it definitely makes it more doable, more realistic actually to kind of to seek help. It's not this unattainable thing.
Great stuff. Thanks again for doing this, and hopefully we speak to you soon on another topic.
Yes, I'd love to. Thank you very much.
Very much, Casey.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening. As always, stay tuned and we'll speak to you in the next episode.